guess I could hand out the supplies ahead of time.
Some what supplies?
Supplies, yeah, how about that? How about that? So, a very sharp pencil. And the next piece is your very own brain.
No, yeah. I remember the brain from last time.
Hello.
Well, you can tell this is a church, everybody's in the back row.
Yeah.
How are you, Ellen?
I'm good, how are you? You're getting around.
I'm moving it.
That's great.
The scabs are almost all gone.
All right. Here's a pen also, but I won't put that on the chair since you're gonna sit there.
I'm ready.
Okay, and how, it's what, 3 weeks or
Well,
not
it's
quite?
been 4 weeks.
4 weeks, okay.
In 10 days, I'm supposed to be, I can quit using the cane.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Until then, they want me to protect it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Dick Childers had both knees replaced, if
Yeah.
I remember correctly. And his seemed to go really well, so I
Yeah.
asked him for a surgeon.
Oh, that's,
Went with him.
that's always good to know. So much name on it.
I passed here.
I don't think I know you, Mary. My name's Jane.
I'm Mary Larkins. I'm an 8:30 person,
Ah.
so
So Sunil has probably seen you before.
yes, Neil has seen me, and
Been a long
I've been around a
time.
while. Our children are about the same age,
Yeah.
so they've
Okay.
kind of grown up together.
Yeah, it's interesting how the 8:30 and the 11 o'clock service people don't
Don't know each
don't know each
Right.
other. It's like,
And I do sit up in the front during the 8:30 service, so I don't sit in the back. but-
Well, we sit up in the front during the 11 o'clock
Yeah,
service.
I'm right over there.
yeah,
We're on
that's
that side.
very sweet.
Because faithfully,
Sunil can probably tell you where
Yeah,
everybody
that's
is.
it.
Ah, I was thinking,
creatures of habit.
oh, I wonder how many people they expect to come if they're having it in the sanctuary. And then Jeff pointed out that they were live streaming it.
Yeah.
So that
That's why
was
it's here, yes.
Yeah, that's
totally
why too.
understandable.
And it's a little experiment here, so.
Well, this is a great idea.
Well, I think it could be good.
Alan, would you like us to move up?
Come on, Joe.
What's this about? Joe's coming. All right.
This is about healing.
Hey, Joe.
And I came to be healed.
Yep. very nice, yeah, so,
No, that's
Two
great.
brothers never give me anything.
yes.
Yeah, my sister died and she didn't send me tickets
Said
to
you
Spain
were
or
from
anywhere.
Bye, see you later.
All right. Well, I'm turning on the microphone because we're at our appointed time. So welcome to our first installment of this round of the Healing Zone. And let's see, I'm gonna go, I put a name tag since you don't have a name tag on the, so you probably know I'm licensed clinical social worker and certified family trauma professional and trauma-focused CBT certified therapist, and a member here at North, also part of the justice and advocacy team. And mental health is an important part of advocacy, we're believing, so that this fits with that, and especially as part of a neighborhood that has so many challenges. One of the things, not that most topic here tonight is going to be faith-based, but for the Justice and Advocacy team, we note that the Hebrew Scriptures are like one big long story of trauma and healing and redemption and finding reasons for hope. So that's part of what we do. Before I go further then, our pastor who is part of Justice and Advocacy and Mission and Outreach here is Sunil. I'm going to have him come say a word of welcome also.
Thank you so much for being here this evening. We're always trying to do different things at Justice and Advocacy, and I've been here in the past couple of sessions here that Alan has led, and it's been really, it has helped me especially to understand how we go through trauma, and all of us have some kind of stuff that we go through in life, and so I think this is an important part of our growing spiritually, and how we can create that healing for others around us as well. And so I think this is an important thing in part of our process of growing. And so thanks, Alan, for leading this. And this is really, we're going to have one every month for the next 4 months. And we're going to be having it in the last week, I think. So, and Alan will give more information of those dates. And so these are like 4 sessions, I think, that that contain all the information about that chapter in that sense. If you have a book, and so you have 4 sessions covering that chapter. And so it'd be good for us to kind of continue following this for the next 4 weeks. So thanks, Alan. And let me just say a prayer before we start. Thank you, Lord, for your healing and your blessing in our lives. And you're a God who builds us up and who never lets us go. And so as we come to you and we learn from you, we ask you, Lord, that you would lead us and help us to be attuned to your voice. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. So we have a little something to do. But I just wanted to say just a slight further word, partly about the healing zone idea is that being a presence in our community, the idea of how do we help people heal from a variety of things. We don't always know what we each other might be trying to heal from, and in the Beatitudes, the blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. is a scripture that I look to. If you think about what we usually think of meek, why would the meek want to inherit the earth? Like, isn't that like someone powerful and, but meek doesn't mean weak. There's a word for weak that we have, and it's called weak, right? It's meek is actually gentle power, right? So for those who want to make it safe for others, who want to make the space a place where people can heal, those would be powerfully gentle folks. And those folks would want to inherit the earth because they would want to make the space safe for everyone. So that's kind of a little part of the idea of the healing zone. Okay, so this is going to be about brain stuff and how it can help us and how we can understand. So stand up if you would. This is not going to be too difficult, I hope. Okay. Yeah, okay. So just keep your feet right where you are, and then we're going to put our hands out in front of us, and then just try and twist around. Don't hurt yourself. But just twist around as far as you can with your feet in the same place, and then just slowly come back around. Okay? So, and you kind of have in your mind how far around you made it when you twisted around. Okay? Now, we're going to stand with our hands at our sides and not actually do it, but just envision ourselves doing that same thing. Just picture yourself standing, putting your hands out. Just picture yourself doing that and twisting around just kind of as far as you can comfortably reach. And then turning back. Okay, so we've done step 1, step 2. Step 3 is let's try it in real life again, okay? Put our hands out and just try to twist around and see how far you get and come back. And what did you notice about that? Anything?
It was easier the second time.
It was easier the second time. How did it feel easier?
I felt like I was being more cautious the first time.
Okay. All right.
The second time I figured like, I could push this more.
A little more, yeah. Did you get around further?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, okay. Who got around further on the second time? All right, so everyone did. All right, great. Thanks, you can. You have to try that in golf. Yeah, well, yes, right. Well, that's visualizing success is a big part of what sports psychology does, right? So that's right on point, right? Is that if you're going to succeed at something in a sport, actually visualizing yourself being successful doing that. It also is just interesting that naturally, without any extra thought or preparation, doing something, visualizing and then repeating it, probably both things, visualizing it, but also practicing the second time, actually improve performance in twisting without any intention or goal set or any striving. It was actually easier the second time, right? So our brain helps us do these things, coordinate these things, sometimes without us thinking. So what we're going to cover is not exactly trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. But the reason I mention it is that the things I'm going to be presenting are pieces from things that are scientifically researched, generally, as we say, evidence-based practice. This approach has 8 steps, and the first 4 steps are very education learning oriented. And so today, so we're going to, over these 4 times, go through those first 4 steps. And I'll tell you what they are. The first one is psychoeducation. So just education about psychology, and we'll be talking about how our brain interacts with trauma. And then the second session, we'll be looking at relaxation, and not so much how to chill out as it is to how to help ourselves be calm in the face of stress when we need to, right? And then the fourth one, affective regulation, that's about our emotions and how we manage those, and understanding that there's some more complicated functions going on when our emotions are related to overwhelming experiences, trauma-related experiences, and then cognitive distortions, and those things that we think, but also things that we believe, especially things that we started believing very young, when our emotions and our thoughts were kind of the same thing. And so if I felt bad, I thought I was bad, and then that's kind of almost like in my bones, right? And it's very hard to kind of counteract that without understanding how all that works. It's still challenging, even when we do understand how it works, but there are some important things to be aware of there. So, all right, we're going to skip past the slide and just do the thing. As we're talking about this, we'll be talking about kind of how our brain works. And before we get to this part about vulnerability, I would like you to think about where you parked and the color of the vehicle that you were closest to. If you can think of out in the parking lot when you arrived this evening. And if you're online, you can think of a vehicle that was closest to where your car's parked. So do you have that? Can you kind of picture that? See where that was? Okay. Now I caught some of you remembering, right? Do you know what you did when you tried to remember that?
Looked
That you, yeah, looked.
to the
Yeah.
left.
You look to the left?
Yeah.
Can you picture the color right now of the
Yeah.
car? Yeah.
It's
What?
gray.
A gray car. Okay. All right. Who else? Could you?
I kind of looked around the whole
Parking lot. Okay. All right. Did you? And
Well, my car dropped me off and went home.
okay.
so
All right. So
I
you
think
didn't
I
have
know
one.
where it parked.
Yes. Okay. All right. Did you also notice looking up to remember? There, you just looked up to remember. Now, if you pictured where you were dropped off today, where was that?
It was at the west entry.
Okay. All right. And any cars that were parked off to the side there?
No.
Yeah, you just looked up to the
Jeff
left
was
there.
standing at
Yes,
the door.
right. Yeah. Okay. So, so do you notice that, like, when you're trying to remember that, you look up for visual recall, right? If you are trying to remember something or trying to think of something, imagine something, if you went back out to the parking lot and I was trying to think of some kind of, a pink giraffe with an alligator tail. If you could picture that being out there in the parking lot, if you try to, even if you try to picture that, do you notice where your eyes go? Where'd your,
It's kind of darting
You're-
upward, and you're doing that.
okay, all right, so you might get some of
Yeah.
both. Any success picturing that at all? Okay, all right. Mary, were you able to picture
I
that?
don't know about that, but I feel like I blinked a couple times just to try to,
Just to try, right,
just to try it.
right. So one of the things about that is that if I say, pink, what did I say? Giraffe with an alligator tail. If you've seen a giraffe before or an alligator tail before, you might try remembering that and then try to imagine what it might look like in the other color or attached to something else. So your eyes might go back and forth. But so generally speaking, we're going to look up one way to access something that we're remembering that we've seen before. We're going to look up the other way to create something that we haven't seen before, right? So that's how we access that. We're built to do that way. Also, then sounds. If we're remembering sounds, we're going to remember those kind of at mid-eye level, or imagine a sound at mid-eye level. And then if we tap into the emotion connected to it, so if it were something wonderful that happened, I remember, and then I feel how wonderful it was, I'm going to look down. So sometimes we associate that mostly with sadness, but it can be something happy too, to just feel in our bodies the emotion that we felt connected to that memory. If you look down, it comes up. So does that kind of make sense? Does that kind of resonate or whatever? All right. So that's part of a sort of hidden process inside. I think why we sort of intuitively know when someone's lying, even if we can't quite put our finger on it, because their eyes are not accessing the information correctly, right? They might be telling us partly true, but then partly not true. And sometimes it's just that quick. It's just a little flash, right? So in the world of trauma treatment, when I would talk with little children and ask them about something that was an event that was traumatizing for them, they might look up and tell me, and I'll ask what happened next. They might tell me, and I'll ask what happened next. And then I said, and then what happened? And then they'll look up the other direction and tell me something, right? So they went from accessing a memory to making something up. And then I would say, oh, that was the hard part, right? Because that's the part that's too hard to remember, right? So I can remember the part leading up, but then when I get to the part where it's too hard, then it's not that it's not true, it's just I don't want to remember what it was, right? So, and very often, oh, that was the hard part, and then they'll look down and remember the feelings and nod yes, right? So that's very helpful in connecting with people too, in that kind of setting. Well, all right, so I'm going to talk about the brain first, and then we're going to go to vulnerability. So in our brains, talking about reptilian brains is not necessarily science, but it's similar in that that's constructed in the same way that the brains were. So if we look from the side, our brains would have a brain stem, a limbic part in here, and then a cortex wrapped over the top, right? And that's kind of similar to that. The brain stem is responsible for survival, right? And so the things that put us at risk for death are things that it handles. It also handles heartbeat and breathing, balance, body temperature regulation. The limbic area of the brain is where a lot of our emotional immediate reactions to things that are not life-threatening, although we may sense danger, we may sense that it's not safe. And then the cortex is where we do our sorting. And rational or thinking brain is helpful, but it's also where we have a lot of our creativity, things that we, lots of art and expression also comes from the neocortex. So I've called that survival, safety, and strategy. Like I said, strategy is maybe a little logic based, but that's the idea. That's the smart part of our brain, which can get hijacked when we have something that is traumatic. So you have a piece of paper, and if you just take it and fold it in half like this, right? You nailed that, didn't you? All right, and then you have a pencil and a pen available for you. So with your pencil on the top part here, if you will make your favorite, your favorite happy emoji, right? If you want to go with the old traditional smiley face, we're all of a generation that we know the smiley face, but there are many other options. But just in pencil, just something that signifies a happiness. All right. And these are not for show and tell, so they're just, you don't have to worry about that part. Okay. And then on the bottom part, take your pen, don't use your pencil for this, and make a bomb. A bomb, something that will be exploding. I can't draw, so mine just looks like that. All right, so this is just a little visual. So your brain, everyone has a brain handout. If you'll take that, it's a brain eraser. See that, right? And this is just, so you know that if you go to erase the pen, it's not going to work very well. If you try to erase the pencil, it's going to. But go ahead and try to erase. See if that pen will erase it all, and then see if the pencil will erase it all. You don't have to erase the whole thing if you don't want to, but so sometimes if that sometimes if you wrote lightly enough in pencil, when you start erasing it, the whole thing just disappears, like you can't see that it was ever there before, right? Most of the time, it doesn't quite erase all of it. There's still a trace of it left, right? But the idea here is that with trauma memories that are registering in the survival area of the brain, they don't erase. The bombs, the exploding things, the things that freeze us, we can't get rid of those memories. And people spend a lot of time and energy trying to erase those bad things, but they don't go away, and that's because the brain is biased for survival. Unfortunately, happy things tend to fade a little bit. Now, there's things we can do that can help strengthen them, and the more we repeat positive things, the stronger those get. So we can intentionally strengthen those things, but that's just kind of a way of noticing that's not something wrong with me. That's how my brain works. That's how we work. And so that's the see which thing I'm pointing to. So I'm going back to trauma equals event plus vulnerability. So humans, as animals, we don't have claws, we don't have very sharp teeth, we don't run all that fast, we don't have thick skin, particularly thick skin, we don't have fur to keep us warm. We're highly vulnerable, right? And so the thing that has helped us survive the most is being nervous, is being on the lookout, is having a brain that remembers danger, right? It's really good at it. Now, we then can come up with those other strategies to help keep us safe, but never forgetting the danger has helped us thrive and create spaces. Of course, now it's hard to imagine what it was like to live in a cave and to be vulnerable, so vulnerable, right? But so, you know, we're kind of wired that way. With traumatic events, the added piece is that humans are born extremely vulnerable, right? So something that happens might be traumatic, even though when it happened may have been traumatic. What I'm thinking of it now, it doesn't seem like it would be. Like, it doesn't seem like it should be traumatic. But vulnerability is the key factor there. So if a 3-month-old is left alone for 5-6 days, they're going to have a hard time making it. You know, that baby is not going to, probably won't make it. If you leave me alone for 6 days, it's a retreat, right? And that's because, you know, now I'm not vulnerable in the way I was at that time, right? So it's very hard for us to even imagine, when we're adults, what it was like to be that vulnerable, to be so utterly helpless that the only thing we could do is cry out when we have a need, right? We really couldn't do anything for ourselves when we're very young. So that's an important part to understand about trauma too. Trauma also. Any thoughts or comments about any of that?
Yeah, I'll make a comment.
Yeah.
Everything you've been talking about so far has been very appropriate to my situation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. All right. Whoop. Okay. All right. So let's see. We haven't really gotten into the vocabulary lesson yet, right? And the vocabulary words are not necessarily that important, but I give them to you because just so you know that they're, you know, these things are have big fancy names. So the polyvagal theory by Dr. Porges is this idea that instead of our brain being connected down through the spine in kind of a singular way to down to the toes and the organs and everything, that it's all integrated. You know, actually discovered that the way we seem to respond to things is that there's 3 different systems within that system. There's 3 different parts. A part that is wired for dealing with trauma, like when we feel that we're immediately threatened or at risk. A part that's dealing with safety, and a part that's dealing with just regular problem solving, which I already introduced those 3 parts, right? So that's kind of part of the polyvagal theory. So there's some other implications of not having that kind of unified neural network, but having a diversified neural network. So that's these 3 features. More vocabulary. Neuroception, co-regulation, and hierarchy. So we'll look at what those things mean. So this is, so neuroception. The basic idea of neuroception, the complicated details on on the slide. But so the main idea is that we perceive things without being aware, right? So neuroception is perception without awareness. And this, the old language was subconscious, right? Is that there's subconscious awareness. So conscious is perception through the five senses, leading to awareness and reaction. Subconscious, which is hard to read here, but subconscious is not quite conscious, perception through the five senses, leading to reaction without awareness, right? So habits and patterns, automatic body functions, cellular memory, creativity, emotions, protection, long-term memory, those processes can happen without us being aware that they're happening. Something like at an emotional level, which is like, what's your favorite color?
Yellow.
Yellow, okay. And do you remember when you chose yellow as your favorite color? Right, yeah. And if I came along and said, well, blue is really the correct favorite color for you, you would go, no, you're crazy, right? Yeah, right.
That's my second favorite color.
Okay, well, how about that? All right. So, but our emotional part of our brain, for whatever reason, it's not a logical reason, makes that kind of choice. Like my favorite color is chosen emotionally, not logically. And it's also chosen without my awareness. The only way I know is when I come along and go, wow, I keep choosing these things that are the same color. Or someone just says, what's your favorite color? And I go, well, I guess it's green. It's not really up in the cortex, right? It's in the emotional center of the brain. It's not about safety, but it's an invisible decision. Look in your closet and go, oh, yeah, right, yeah. So it's interesting. So, I mean, does that make sense? Like, we kind of know after the fact. Like, it is me, I chose it, but I don't really know about the decision until afterwards, right? And when we think about emotions in general, we don't choose our emotions to start with. The whole thing of cognitive behavior therapy is that you can influence and shift your emotions. But the start is that I might feel angry about something that I just heard, right? And I don't choose that, I notice it. See, the difference between that is that I've already had the reaction. My emotional brain has chosen to be angry about that. Probably something unfair, unjust, not correct. And then I notice, maybe my jaw's clenched, or this, or maybe I'm just getting red, or whatever it is. I go, oh, well, yeah, that's me, I'm angry, right? With me, I'm probably start listing off all the reasons why the person's wrong, or whatever, But that's, so that's awareness after the fact. The emotional part of the brain then picks up on whether things are safe or not, right? So if they're not safe, for example, if you got startled, you might not actually be unsafe, but the emotional part of the brain is triggered into believing that you need that jolt of adrenaline and cortisol to be ready. We know that's the fight or flight response, right? Is that, and I don't know how they measured this. I should go back and check sometime. But apparently with a heart monitor, they measured that a person walking in the woods and seeing a bear actually has prepped and started to turn and move away before the brain actually thinks, oh, that's a bear, right? That the emotional part of the brain is set up to react quickly. That's part of our defense our defense protection that is, hey, don't think, get away, right? Don't think about, was that a grizzly or a brown bear? Was that, Yeah. My daughter and I were walking out in Sequoia National Park, and there was a fuss over along the trail, and we looked, and there was I suppose it was a 1-year-old cub kind of moseying up the side of a really steep hill, and just the experience is like before you even register what it is that's going on, it's up and over the ridge and gone. That was a bear. We just saw a bear, which was particularly concerning when I'm with Delaney because you're not going to run. You can't get away. But anyway, it was exciting because the bear ran.
Took a look at you guys and
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So that's neuroception. Does that make sense? Like, there's a lot of things that our brain is perceiving that we're not necessarily aware of. And that actually makes everything work really well, right? As long as we try to pay attention to what's happening with ourselves so that we can get the evidence after the fact, if we need to. All right, the second part of the polyvagal theory, remember our vocabulary lessons, polyvagal theory, which is about how the brain is in 3 parts. Neuroception is the one piece that we perceive things without being aware. Second, co-regulation is a part of how we keep from, like if we're startled by something, how do we calm ourselves back down, or how do we stay even-keeled so that we can use the smart part of our brain even when we're in distress, right? Which is very important because like that's our second, being nervous is one asset, but being able to think about multiple options and all of the resources that we have available is the second option, right? And if we get too distressed and dysregulated, that's a fashionable word these days. If we get dysregulated, then we really don't have access to our resources that we have available. So co-regulation, all mammals have this biologically based feature. We regulate our emotions. We stay within a range, sometimes called the window of tolerance. There's more jargon for you. So we regulate in connection with each other and even across species. So I put these 2 pictures up here because this is called the canine play bow. When the dog puts their head down like that, and then they're going to play, right? They're getting ready to play. When a cat puts the head down, they're getting ready to pounce, right? And we instinctively, we just know that, right? That is built into our genetic knowledge. So we don't co-regulate with cats very well, right? That's yes. We can live with cats, but we don't co-regulate with them. That's not quite true because often cats are very comforting. But dogs have more of that interactional co-regulation. So infants, if you think of holding the infant and looking into their eyes and rocking them or feeding them, that co-regulation happens, together. You're sensing each other. If the infant is upset, you can feel that. They may be tensing or just, we just sense their distress, and we try to respond to that and help ease and comfort that. So that's very much built in early on that we regulate together, right? And if I'm a nervous parent and I can't quite figure out how to do this, I'm probably not helping the infant co-regulate. So So that's an important part of, helping new parents, right, to be able to calm themselves and soothe themselves, because they're going to be helping that process with their infant. I think that during COVID, the isolation that we experienced, less eye-to-eye contact, even just being near other people, removed some of the co-regulating that just happens when we just pass each other by, or just nod or say hi, see someone we recognize, not necessarily a close friend or anything, but just that other human contact. That when that was taken away, we don't know why, we're just a little less happy, a little less, and we know we can call it isolation and all of that, which is what that's part of, but that co-regulation happens below our level of awareness, right? That it's happening at an emotional level, so it's perception without awareness. So that's part. I keep wanting to push the. Any thoughts or comments about that? Any ways that you notice that?
I think what I'm understanding is that how our brain works and our body reacts is very, very complicated. And
Yeah.
and yet, and you're describing it, it makes sense of how there's a lot of feedback and within our own mind and body. Yeah. And it's making a lot of sense to me.
Well, good. I think, gathering this information, like I had to go and sit through neurobiology conferences for about 3 years before I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get this. But I agree. It helps to make sense of what's happening, and also that some of the reactions that we have are actually normal, healthy reactions, even though they don't quite sit comfortably sometimes. And then it can help us figure out how to help it sit more comfortably, maybe without.
We're having an interesting
Yeah.
problem with squirrels that keep attacking our bird feeder. And we have tried all kinds of things.
Yes.
Currently, we're working with a slinky. But what's really interesting is that if a squirrel is going up the pole and trying to attack the thing, if Carl so much as moves his chair, they leave.
Yeah.
I mean, it used to be they didn't leave until he got to the window.
Yeah.
But now, if he moves, zap,
Yeah.
they're gone. I can move, and it doesn't do that much. Oliver can move, and it doesn't do that much. But these guys will be looking at you. When they hear the slightest noise, zip,
Interesting. All right.
bless you.
Okay, so that is in the intro to the, or kind of leads us into that third piece of information about the polyvagal theory, is that our brains are biased for survival. So I'll describe those modes each a little bit, but that's why. We'll just. That's why it's important to understand what's happening. Like, why did I do that? What was I thinking? Well, I probably wasn't thinking at the moment. I was, in a different mode, in reaction mode. Yeah. Okay, so survival mode. People, we also call this faint or freeze, when the threat to our survival is so severe that the brain triggers that preservation measure or shock. And if you think of someone going into shock, they're kind of immobilized or frozen. We have a good story here. I'm going to go back to that. But this is all. So when my dad was attacked by a bull, because I grew up on a ranch, and when he was out fixing fence, didn't realize that the neighbor's bull, which was way off, had come over. And I don't know if it looked exactly like that, but it looked kind of nasty like that. So it knocked him down, and he laid there on the ground, and it sniffed at him, and just kind of, watched, and then decided it was going to take off and leave and go off on its way. And so as a kid, I always thought, brilliant genius, right? Not that you aren't, but for laying on the ground there, playing dead, and getting the bull to leave you alone. But then when I learned about all this stuff, I said, I have to go back and ask, right? What, knowing this stuff, my guess is that when you were, knocked down, that you're so scared, that you're kind of frozen, you just can't move. And so my dad said, well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that, in fact, I think you said you were looking up at the bull, and you just, like, you wanted to move or get away, but you just couldn't. You just couldn't quite move at the first, right? So that would be an example of faint freeze, like when the brain stem takes over and puts us in survival mode, right? Now, we may not literally freeze, but what does happen when we're overwhelmed with trauma, if that's something that we think of as traumatic things that happen in childhood, abusive things, horrible, adverse events, or single episodes, or military experiences, the brain, the neural activity and the blood flow to the cortex is slowed down and shut down. So it's more like brownout. Of course, if you faint, it's blackout, right? If you faint, you don't have any memories while you fainted. You're out. So that means the blood flow to the cortex has been completely shut down. Body has gone into survival mode until it feels like things are back up and running, and then you come to again, right? And that worked.
When I talked with, I acted like I was the one that I just played dead, but afterwards he said, first I wasn't thinking that. I was just, I couldn't move, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Right. That's.
And it worked, and so I said, well, I did it on purpose, but
yeah.
I couldn't do anything else.
Yes. Right. Well, and it's interesting because sometimes, at the time, you may have believed you did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we tell ourselves, oh yeah, I chose to do that. Right. And that's all part of the survival mechanism and the safety mechanism kind of staying hidden, right? Sometimes called the implicit brain, right? Not the part that we know that's explicit, but the part that's kind of hidden and behind the scenes. And we see that, so fainting mice are the same, the cat catches the mouse, and cats like to shake, things around, or bat things around. So the mouse faints, goes limp, and the cat's batting it around and goes, this thing's dead. This thing's look like it's been dead for a while, right? It's not twitching. I don't want to eat a rotten mouse. It's been dead. So cat, You know, the cat's not thinking that, but that's instinctual for the cat, right? That's why you're batting that stuff around to see if it's fresh. So the cat takes off, and then later the mouse comes to and might be a little worse for wear, but you know, scampers off to safety to live another day. So those kinds of things are built in one degree or another to mammals, right? So but that's part of what happens for us. So one of the things I think that is part of what happens in a domestic violence situation is the perpetrator terrifies the person who's being the victim of violence, and that person then loses their rational thinking. They go into survival mode, right? And then things settle down a little bit. They usually have a kind of an emotional dance. They go through a routine, and things start to settle down, and the victim, I mean, usually we're thinking of a man and a woman, the woman begins to think, okay, I got to get out of here, right? This is not safe for me. And the perpetrator senses that she is beginning to think clearly. She's thawed out a bit, right? She's not frozen. And then traumatizes again, either with a threat or some kind of violent action. And that freezes her again. And then she can't think straight. She can't think of how to get away. And then that process repeats. So thawing, refreeze, thaw, refreeze. Now there's other parts that are part of that, but part of, you know, why can't you leave? Many victims they kind of don't know, and then they tell themselves, well, I chose to stay. And they feel very badly about themselves for staying, even though a part of them really wanted to leave. And so I think that's an important part of that trauma cycle being revisited and revisited that makes it hard to get your senses about you so you can get up and get away. So safety mode, it's more, yeah, I mentioned, it's more like the fight or flight. Like something startles you or something makes us fearful, and we immediately have the adrenaline, the cortisol, we're ready to either defend ourselves or flee, get away. And strategy mode, sometimes the best defense is a great offense. Well, yeah. So if we have a chance to think about things, we can do a lot if we feel safe at the present moment. Our logic, our memory, our creativity, our intuition, our strength, and collaborating with others can be put to use. Any other thoughts there? Okay, so next vocabulary word, neuroplasticity, which just means that we can change, right? So this is a little video I'm going to switch to just about how experiences impact early brain structures, but part of that is consistent otherwise also. Okay, let me see here. All right, now I can pull up the video. Here we go.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
All right. So that little 2-minute video has a lot in it. See if I can get back to my right spot. Yeah, okay. What did you notice in there?
A lot of changing going on in the brain.
Okay. Yeah, lots of.
It's just, the young years with that primary caretaker are so, so important in terms of helping a child learn and grow and know what to expect to the best that can happen.
Yeah.
Just recently read an
There's lots of-
article about how being on videos and phones and stuff actually changes the way a child's brain develops. That is really scary. But,
Yeah.
you know, this would back that up, saying that
Right.
it's what you're experiencing all the time is what's gonna, your brain's gonna develop in that direction.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it probably depends on what you're looking at on the
Yeah.
phone and on the computer, right?
In general, our great-grandson has not been exposed to violent things.
Yeah,
But one time, somebody put a thing on, and all of a sudden, a child who'd never been afraid of the darkness was now afraid of the darkness.
yeah, yeah. All the loud motorcycle noises there reminds me that my son could sleep through anything when he was an infant, right? And then I thought, oh, you know, that's great. And then watched some of the early videos when we first we lived in an apartment that was like 10 feet off of a busy street, and in the videos there's all this loud noise in the background, right? And so, you know, getting used to noise and being able to just sleep through it was part of that was a positive learning.
But if you grow up in an area where you're hearing gunshots,
Right,
it's not gonna go
right.
that way.
Right. And in just referencing back to co-regulation, you're going to notice that the people around you are reacting to that, right? Not only that it might seem startling and dangerous, but also it activates the people around you. And so, yeah, you learn a fear response, a fight or flight response, maybe. And then if it comes in your home, you get a faint freeze response to that violence, probably. Mary, you're talking about all those early experiences. One of the nice parts, so it emphasizes how important those are, and at the same time gives this sense that there's a lot of flexibility in there, right? Like if something shifts one way, there's all this building and making neural pathways and which includes things like comforting. So there's both parts, right? Like if you don't have very much stimulation, or if all your stimulation is negative, you are going to be drawn to dealing with that, and you're going to be have a more narrow, you're not going to feel confident enough to explore things, right? So it's limiting. Lots going on. The other thing I think that's helpful in going on to look at trauma more specifically, like how we can address it, is that image of a three-dimensional spider web. Like, it's not just a flat-out spider web, but like everything's connected all over the place. And the more connections you build, the faster things move. So this just part of thinking as we prepare for our future sessions and looking more specifically at trauma. Not so much that it's not intended to scare you with the image of a spider in case you have arachnophobia. It's just the spider web itself, right? Is that the genius of a spider web is that the spider may not be in the center, but may be way off to the edge, and something can tap it over here, and it resonates the whole web, right? And this is what happens, this is what we understand to happen with traumatic events, that the brain has remembered something that's traumatic and difficult, and now that's stored in the web of danger memories. So that if something reminds me of danger, it may resonate all across that system. Is that system my survival system? Is it my safety system where I need to activate myself for safety? Survival, shut myself down, right? Survival is about freezing for conservation. I'm just going to shut down here and survive. So we will be talking about, what things are in the web of trauma memories, and then also looking at what things are in the positive memories. So we did our sheet of paper where, that positive memory can get erased easily. It's very helpful to connect it, to make sure it gets connected to the web of other positive memories to help it strengthen and have more staying power. So we're going to finish up tonight with this. This is, so there's research done 20 years or so ago about childhood experiences that present adversity. And interesting thing is it's a medical research that has implications for psychology, sociology, that sort of thing. But these are things that when in combination have very significant impact their trauma occurrences, which may not be surprising. So the first one is basically if you were humiliated, verbally terrified in the household that you were growing up by an adult or parent. Number two, Did anyone in the household physically hurt you or dominate you, push, grab, slap, or throw something at you or hit you so hard you had marks? Number 3 is about sexual abuse. Number 4 is about just being neglected or feeling isolated in your family. 5, were your parents ever separated or divorced? 6, did a household member go to prison? 7, did you often or very often not have enough to eat or dirty clothes or no one to protect you? Parents too drunk or too high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed it. 8, mother or stepmother basically physically abused or domestic violence. 9, did you live with someone who had a problem drinking or used street drugs? And 10, was a household member depressed or mentally ill? This list has been somewhat expanded over time, but the point is that this is not a list of things that people who are experts sat around and decided, oh, these are the things we're going to ask people. This was 17,000 people and looked at their medical conditions and then correlated off of that for the frequency of these things. So there's no causality implied other than the correlations are crazy, strong correlations. If you have 4 or more of those, we know that the chance of you having a suicide attempt in your life is 1,200% greater. But without knowing anything else about you, we know that. Heart disease is like triple the occurrence of heart disease. I should have my numbers down here, but these if you've looked at medical research, you might notice, if you exercise 30 minutes or more 5 days a week, you decrease your chance of having a heart attack by 25%. Okay, that's impressive, 25%. These percentages are hundreds of percentages, right? The correlations are staggering, really. But, we don't really focus on them as health problems.
In working with people who are coming out of incarceration,
Right.
It's amazing how many of them tell me they lived with a parent or a step-parent that abused them or that totally ignored them.
Yeah,
And I just did not grow up in that kind of a situation.
right.
So it blows my mind, but it,
Yeah. And one of the things that may be really helpful for them is to say, when you experience, that's trauma. Now, if you had one of those things happen, though, that doesn't create those strong correlations. The strong correlations are from 4 or more, generally, for the strong correlations. And that reflects chronic, multi-directional trauma, which becomes overwhelming and has a systemic impact on people, right? Not that single traumas don't have harm and aren't impactful, but just in looking at, anyway, that's just an important point to note there. So if you have someone who's had these traumatic experiences over and over again, of course, then that's chronic. Like, it's not like one day I was ignored. It's like my whole life, right? Day after day after day. So to be able to say, well, when you're traumatized, the cortex, blood shuts down, neural activity slows down. You can't make good judgments. So when your chances of ending up in jail, in prison for a while, when you get triggered over and over and over again, your poor judgment that's going to show up doesn't mean you're an idiot, but that you are having a hard time making good choices because the smart part of your brain is shut down, right? In some ways, it's kind of a miracle that you've only made the mistakes you did. Right? As pervasive as this kind of thing is. I don't know if that's helpful.
That really fits.
Yeah, but we had a 16-year-old who participated in one of these rounds of classes, and after the class, I said, "Well, did any of this make sense to you, or what did you get out of it?" And he goes, "Well, I think I don't blame myself so much for some of the mistakes I made." I said, "I think you're getting it. I think that's a great outcome."
Well,
So.
and when you're blaming yourself for those things that you did, your self-confidence bottoms out.
Right.
And that's another real
Right.
characteristic of returning citizens,
Yes.
is that they don't have any faith at all in themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
It really makes you realize how important forgiveness is. That there's so many of these things that we're not even responsible for that are causing us to do crazy or bad things, and for ourselves, but for others. That we need to be so conscious of the need to be forgiving, because we don't understand so much of the time, and then we judge. Or maybe on the basis of our own life, we judge them, or other. Our
Yeah.
Bible says all this, and all this stuff about sin. Sometimes the church is so condemning about sin without teaching us about what's going on in our minds and our lives is causing all of the things to happen, and how we can improve on it.
yeah.
I don't want to get too personal here, but I had a brother who was bipolar,
Okay,
and he terrorized me my whole life.
okay.
Now, my mother's father was bipolar, so she grew up in that environment. And then her son, but her reaction to me was, she was in complete denial. I would say to her, "Why does he hate me so much? Why is he so mean to me?" And she'd say, "Oh, you just misunderstand him." And that's what I heard my whole life is, "Oh, you just misunderstand him." I did not misunderstand him.
Yeah, you knew what you were feeling.
I knew exactly what I was going through, but she wasn't supporting me in any way. And boy, talk about chisel away your self-confidence.
Yeah, yeah. So stick with us, because we've got things to do to help. I mean, I'm sure that you've done lots of things that have helped yourself. So it's not as if you're defenseless. However, hopefully this way of thinking of it may inspire, either affirm you for what you've been doing, and or more creative ideas and thoughts. I appreciate you sharing that.
Alan, how long have people been really aware of this and studying it? It seems to me like it's a relatively new thing on the horizon.
It is somewhat in terms of, I mean, so I can answer that two ways. One is this study, which was done in the late 90s, you could say, wow, you've got this impact. I mean, this is a study done in combination. It's a medical study in combination with the CDC, and these amazing, impactful outcomes. Even people in professional circles. I mean, I think people in professional circles know about it, but I don't think they often take it to heart. But it has helped. It has helped a lot of this discovery, like the polyvagal theory and this understanding of how trauma happens and how it impacts us. A lot of that is relatively recent in terms of, like, when you think of treatment-wise. Unfortunately, it takes a long time for all of that to trickle out, which is why we're doing this, right? I mean,
Right.
I think trying to make the information accessible to people without, yeah, just to know that it's out there.
Like
Yeah.
in the medical field, they're starting to do more aware of that, you know, they're asking you questions about depressing, things that depress you and like that. There didn't used to be any of that. Just the last few years, it seems like they're becoming aware of that, you know, if
Right.
you're depressed.
You were talking about judgment. Also one of my favorite things to mention. The things that the adults and the parents do are impact the children to the third and fourth generations. Acceptance, that's safe for people. So a big part of making it safe for people to heal is not just identifying that people are victims, because yes, people are victims, but just staying in a victim space without information